Lori, this one is you, and then I'll.
Yeah, thank you. That's what I was going to get to. So just high level of a lot of the work that's gone on and still continues to go on. So we approached this with an intent to maintain staff. We have new needs that we've never had before because of the pandemic. We know we needed to really put together a rich set of software platforms, given that so much of our work is remote. Even in opening schools this fall, there will always be groups of kids working remotely because we can't bring everybody back all at once or full time, never mind if we have to close again. We reviewed all of our materials and especially looked at those shared by students. We're going more and more toward single-use items and really sidelining things that are used by multiple kids. We're also creating tools for them to have at home in case we're closed for an extended period. We've been working on scheduling, a lot of work on scheduling and space usage, and that continues and is going to be reviewed right up till we get these final plans pulled together. We are limiting access to the buildings, and that has an impact, for example, on daily substitutes. We're going to be minimizing, actually starting without substitutes coming in on per diem basis and utilizing in-house staff. We're going to be limiting student travel for field trips. That's not allowed right now, so we need to be cognizant of that. It did have some cost attached to it that we've been able to lower our request, still leaving money for virtual field trips. And obviously with no transportation involved, that's another cost factor. We did have increased need for summer services, and we did that fairly proactively, both regular education and special education. So that's been factored in with what those needs were. And we are targeting certain kinds of professional development, certainly in technology, reworking of curriculum, social emotional learning, and our equity and anti-racist work. So we've done a lot of creative work there, really maximizing on our in-house expertise, as well as some consultants that we have longtime relationships with, both of which allowed for cost-effective measures and ongoing professional development with teachers essentially volunteering all summer, which we're grateful for their response to that. There are certain programs that are under major review. We're awaiting word on sports any minute now from the state, both DESE and MIAA. We're reworking performing arts and what those options are. We're not allowed to sing or play airborne-based instruments in the schools anytime soon, so that's considerable change to those programs. We have identified and stocked up on a wide range of PPE. We can talk on that if you'd like. We do believe and are securing outdoor spaces. This will give us different options in the fall and spring months for kids and teachers to be outside. We are creating screening tools so that we're collecting on a daily basis parent, student, or teacher, faculty, staff reports of a lack of symptoms, which means they can come to school and work. We're working closely with the Concord Health Department and our lead nurses to look at our health service delivery and the role and protocols we need both for working with ill kids and if we had a COVID case, as well as the daily cleaning protocols, the deep cleaning protocols, and obviously if there's a response needed to a breakout of any single or multiple cases of illness. We are looking at both aggregate and individual needs for social emotional support. We've done a lot of work with the programs we have around our advisory and open circle pieces, and are also really making sure we've got tools to identify those needing individual access. We have screeners in place electronically, self-reported forms kids fill out, as well as obviously a great deal of teacher input. And then finally, needing more intervention services. Our goal, just like it has always been, is to work with kids before they're falling way behind or before they're in crisis. And so we're building those kinds of structures and making sure some of the models we have that have been so effective during normal times are remaining intact despite all the very different moving pieces.
Excuse me, Dr. Hunter, may I just ask a quick question? Would you prefer us to hold questions till the end?
If it's programmatic on any of those pieces, I think you could ask those now. If you have fiscal actual dollars, that might be best at the end after Jared's done some of that.
So let me just give it a try. There are four categories here that identified as new need, and I'm just wondering, are those not areas that would be compensated by the CARES Act?
So the CARES Act, and Jared can talk more on how the CARES Act pertains, they certainly could be. And so the piece that we're looking at and have had considerable conversation with the school committee about, we could use the CARES Act money for some offsets. We could also use the CARES money to help remain contingent, provide contingency money for the other unknowns that haven't come up yet. And that's the discussion we've had at the school committee, is to do some of both of those, offsetting some of the budget, but also leaving some for contingency of the things we haven't yet identified as we actually open the schools.
Dr. Hunter, one other quick request. Would you just very briefly talk about the discussion you had today earlier about the HVAC system?
Oh, sure.
I thought that was very informative.
Great, thanks, Dee. We had an HVAC consultant come through each of the schools in the last 2 weeks. He's put together a status report for us, which overall was very, very good. He did identify areas of need at, no surprise to all of you, Sanborn, Peabody, and Ripley. And the recommendation is for air purifiers to be installed in those spaces to ensure that the ventilation is adequate. We already have purchased those, and Jared can talk on the funding source. Those would certainly be CARES qualified, no question about that. And that's going to allow us to open schools in a safe way.
Yep. So just so you know, we ordered about 7 air scrubbers. They'll be in the first week in September. We ordered 57 HEPA air filters. Those will be in at the end of this week. In addition, the air purifiers, they'll be in at the end of this week. And then we bought 9 months worth of HEPA filters for all those units. So we're stocking up. So the new budget that we're asking for CCRSD is $35,144,038. The sum of assessments for Concord would be $23,747,968. That includes a debt assessment of $3,311,646.
Good. Very good.
The same approaches, we can go through that again, but the same approaches to this budget as the CPS that Laurie just gave us. The same zero-based budget process. The other thing that we do look into is on the high school side is the revenue side. We identified a number of budget drivers in this budget. Guidance was an increase. There was an increase.
Forward the slide, Jared.
Oh, I'm on the wrong one. I have too many screens. I'm sorry. So same zero-based budget process that you saw before. Our budget drivers, so we identified $1,166,965 in budget drivers. These are a number of them here. We did increase a guidance position last year by 1, but through attrition and some salary savings, the increase is only $42,356. There was actually a budget correction in the IT side, so that's actually not an increase as well. We had to increase the general funds portion of the monitors. The reason for that is because we anticipated getting 50,000. Every year we spend 50,000 to offset these salaries. We anticipate due to the hybrid schedule next year that we would only receive about 25,000 in fees, so we had to offset that. We hired a special education coordinator, and then contract services have increased. Our insurance and our pension is a budget driver, a modest one of just under 73,000. Overall, the teachers' amount is going up 602,739. That is due to steps and lanes for the most part. And tutors have increased. That is more in line. This number held actually in the December budget cycle. We negotiated with them last year, and the way that we recorded the tutors in FY21 is more in line with how they were getting paid. And then utilities expecting an increase more in line with FY19 actuals. So again, overall, we identified $1,166,965 in budget drivers. To offset those budget drivers, we identified $694,000 in offsets. The biggest one being special education offsets. Debt also went down, and then field trips, the same as at CPS, we reduced those and kept a little bit of money in there for virtual. I just wanted to show our OPEB. So currently we are funding OPEB at $550,000. This is an updated balance as of June 30th. We have $5,668,402.
Can you speak to how that's working out in terms of the required contribution? Are we on a track to 2030 to
2030, the same year that the high school debt is being retired. So this is the they changed they don't call it the ARC anymore, but this is the suggested amount as of our last evaluation. As of right now, we are, as you can see, we have lowered the amount that the E&D is supporting the general fund revenue. At this time, we reduced that in FY21 to $300,000. There's some really good news, as I reported earlier, that we are now off Moody's watch list. We expect to have roughly 1.6 to 1.7 million in our E&D, which is going to be just under 5%. In addition to our circuit breaker at the high school will be maxed out. And all of our other reserves are healthy at this time at the high school. So they looked into all that. It was a fairly quick conversation. I felt that we were going to be off their watch list, and we now are. So that's really good news.
Hey,
So you really don't have a place to park that 300,000 because you've tapped, you're maxed out in your various accounts where it could go. So it's okay to
for
use
this year, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's reserved to reduce. That's how they call that. So you can go over the 5% if an amount is set aside for to reduce next year's budget.
So Jared, last time I saw something, I thought it was like you were 1.8 million on E&D, but then you had earmarked 300,000 to be used for the FY21. So you would be down around 1.5 in E&D after after the tagging. Is that the right range? No, it's up a little bit.
Yeah. So our E&D is actually, it's about 1.7 we're estimating. If you added the 300,000 in, we'd be at 2 million. But because that was voted to reduce the next year's budget, that is what they call reserve to reduce, and that is not applied to the current balance.
Okay, I always get that wrong. So 1.7 is net of the 300,000. I don't have to deduct it again. Okay.
Correct.
So E&D after the tagging for 300,000 is about 1.7 million.
Yeah, which will be just under 5%.
Okay. And the 5% rule, does that run to your budget? What is it, 5%?
General fund. So it's 5% of the general fund amount. Yeah.
Okay, of the general fund budget. And then the athletic and the food service revolvers, you put in 3 months, I think you said, for each of those.
Correct.
So go ahead.
Yeah, my rule of thumb for food service is three to 4 months worth of expenditures.
Yep.
And then the athletic revolving, I'm just trying to, we've had a history of having around 70,000, 50 to 70,000 in there.
Okay.
And when I do the budget, I take a look at that, figure out what we're going to be using to spend against that, and wanted to get that monies back in to close the year, and we were able to do that.
Okay, so athletic is somewhere between 50 and 70 as a balance. And what does food end up with, the 3 to 4 months?
Food services, we usually have about 120,000 in there. You know, I always get that in CPS confused, but right now we will have approximately, and I know the page, food service is about 120,000. So we ended last year with $121,066, and I tried to get it around that. It might be a little bit lower than that for this year, but I'd like to have, like I said, between 3 and 4 months worth, and it's about 35,000 a month is our expenses, give or take.
Okay, 35,000 a month. And E&D at the end of 6/30/19, so the prior year, what would that have looked like?
So we were about 2.7%. So
Okay.
we have gone up significantly.
Quite a bit. So we've almost doubled, well, more than doubled it, I guess. Yeah. Okay. So 2.7% of your general fund budget is what you would have had a year earlier. Okay.
Now, one of the main reasons for that is in FY18, we had 700,000 reserved to offset the budget.
Right.
So that was going against it. That next year we had 689,000.
Right.
So last year was the first year that we were able to start getting that E&D balance up because we reduced it to 350, and then this year 300.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Great. So here is the comparison of assessments. So for Concord right now, the total assessment is $23,747,968. That includes the debt amount. That is a $402,980 increase, or 1.73%. Overall, our assessments have only increased $183,026, or 0.59%. It's important to note that I am doing an enrollment study. Concord is going to continue to go up. It's probably going to be around 1 to 1.1% next year, which will have a budget impact. It gets a little stable in FY22 and FY23. I think it's around a 0.25 increase, but Concord is continuing to increase, and that will have an assessment impact. So again, our budget that we are requesting is $35,144,038. And again, Concord's total assessment is $23,747,968.
Chris, you have a question?
I do. I have one more, I think.
Sure.
Jared, just going back to the tutoring growth at the high school versus CPS.
Yes.
So at CPS, there was a description about needing some for not related to the pandemic, and I assume some related to the pandemic, or perhaps a reaction to the pandemic. We were going to keep tutors in place. At the high school, the number was up, but it sounded like that was a different rationale. Am I right
so
on
the number
that?
Yes, the number is up about 120 something thousand. So we negotiated with the tutors last year, and this budget was the first time that we had used FTEs, and we had identified what a 1.0 FTE is. So it was sort of a budget correction. We did budget a little bit differently for the FY20 budget. This is more of an exact. They also had some extra hours that they were, a lot of extra hours that wasn't necessarily encumbered. So when I did do the FY20 budget and we did zero base it, it was hard to know exactly the hours that they were working. Now we identified what a 1.0 is. In addition, they do have some members that we call it an after-school homework club, or we don't call it a club, or an after-school homework.
Yeah.
And they're paid additional money for that. That is now reflected in that budget number. So it's more of, we haven't had an increase in tutors. It's just now I have a real understanding of our obligation.
Okay. So at the high school, we don't need additional, there isn't really a change in the service around tutors. It's more of an accounting accrual item. Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mary?
First of all, I want to thank you and the school committee and Laurie for coming in at the revised guideline that we published, finding that 310,000. That helps a lot. It brings the property tax down to something more manageable. So thank you for that. I heard you saying that enrollment, I'm thinking ahead now to FY22, and you said the enrollment is going to go up, and I think you said 1%. So does that mean that Concord goes from 76% to 77? Is that what you meant by the, okay, that's all. Okay, I'm thinking ahead too far, but thank you.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there. We'll have the specifics October 1st.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll have some very preliminary numbers of what that would look like. I might even compare it to FY21's current assessments and showing you what that enrollment would look like if the numbers stayed the same.
Great,
Just
thank
so you
you.
can get a ballpark.
Yeah, we'll take that into account when we're doing the guideline, the enrollment. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else with a question on the high school budget? John?
Jared, could you just give me a minute on the accounting treatment for the CARES money? There are certain things in the budgets that will be, compensated with the CARES money. Is it just a timing difference? Where does that show up and where does it go?
Sure.
If you've got an item that you're requesting in your budget and then you're subsequently compensated with CARES money, how does that work?
Right. So at the high school, I'm anticipating 297,000. I know that I'm identifying more than $297,000 worth of expenses. I know that. We have to use that CARES money by December 30th. So what we're doing is just some of the things we're using them for. Masks. We're getting 2/10 at the high school. We might get separate funding for that, but right now that's going to be COVID money. Sanitizer, plexiglass. A lot of our new softwares that are required to enhance our remote learnings. What we're doing is when somebody requests that, it gets vetted. Once it's approved, we assign it to a special account. And then we know we're going to be audited on that. Ian Rains is keeping an unbelievable track of all of those costs. So it's sort of like set up like a grant, setting up an account and just pushing it to that account number. So when it's time, when the money comes in and we can offset it, it will be a simple thing to do. Now, if there are things in the general fund that were budgeted that we will now be used to offset that, to get to the guideline number, we did two things. The first thing we did is we increased our Chapter 70 number from the 2.5 that we had to what the current number is, which is 2.747 million. So that was 247,000. In addition, we did a offset in this budget, not the CPS budget, but this budget of $185,116, and that is a COVID CARES Act offset. That we're going to be using monies that would have been general fund and appropriate and are going to be offset to that CARES Act. So that limits the amount that we're going to get. So that limits the 297 minus the 116. But I'm comfortable with all the contingencies that we currently have. If we need additional monies, we can use that. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Any further questions?
Sorry, just to follow on, since Jared mentioned Chapter 70, do we have any sense yet? I mean, this is great news. It's level funded, for the time being, but What about the next year? Do we have any sense yet as to the sustainability of that level funding?
I'm hearing that they are making a true commitment to education. They put too many years into the Laurie, what was the monies called for the education reform? The
Student Opportunity Act?
I'm sorry, the student. So they put so much time and effort into that Student Opportunity Act that they were to reduce Chapter 70, that would take us back years. So I know there's a commitment to that. I am going to have a lot of conversations with colleagues in my associations on what to plan on for FY22, because the governor will just have passed FY21, probably in October, when I'm going to be presenting to you again. So I wouldn't be aggressive, but I think the number that I plan on using for FY22 will be similar to the 2.747 that we're getting currently right now, which is a much better starting place than the 2.5 that I had on July 27th. The other thing that I'm unclear of, other than circuit breaker, that's another thing that we're unclear of, is Chapter 71 transportation reimbursement. I had an offset of $675,000 on July 27th, or I should say last winter. I reduced that by $125,000 on July 27th, but I don't know what's going to happen there. So I think that's a good shave off right now. I feel comfortable with that. If they do reduce it more, I don't think it will be much more than that, but I don't know.
I won't hold you to it.
Okay.
Yeah, just a couple questions, Jarrett. You said you maxed out on the circuit breaker. Could you give me a number?
I can. So we're going to be just over about 1.1 million.
1.1 million. And then maybe I missed it. Did you talk about the prepays that you made this year?
So I did not in this presentation. So we made we prepaid two things. The first one is we prepaid about $261,000 in special ed tuitions. That number is in our budget, meaning we did not assume that prepayment, and we're pushing that forward as a contingency to hopefully offset FY22 or FY23's budget. In addition, we prepaid $351,000 in laptops. And that's also something that could help future budgets.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the Finance Committee? Chris.
I think these might be for Dr. Hunter. So as I followed the conversation past couple of weeks, I guess, on this, there was a discussion about laptops versus iPads at CPS, and then was also discussion potentially of some early retirements. And I'm just curious if there was any more information on either of the, if you've decided how the budget reflects those two.
We did end up going with laptops at the elementary schools, and that's all within the budgeted number. We've gone to a 4-year lease. We were behind on the replacement cycle. So rather than just dump money into a Chromebook program that we know those machines aren't going to last, we're getting 5 to 8 years out of the Apple machines. It made more sense to us to invest in the lease and get the fleet of laptops at the elementaries back up to par while we fix the crisis issue we have right this minute. So that's where we landed there. It's within budget. It will mean we have to keep those lines stable, which was the goal all along. We really wouldn't have had a choice but to stabilize those lines because the age of the machines at the elementary was going to require that we fund it, irrelevant of really how we are in terms of big picture budget process. So we feel really good about that, actually. We feel like that's a known cost going forward. We know we're going to be in good shape for years to come as a result of that decision, as well as able to provide for kids during the pandemic. The early retirement program was successful at CPS. We had 5 teachers participate. So that's been positive and a positive for everyone involved.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Any more questions from the Finance Committee? I see none. I see no one stepping to the virtual microphone via Q&A or raising their virtual hand on the attendee list. So I think we're ready to move